Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Today we'll be looking at Season 61 and trying to figure out some starting paths we can take. Normally when you look at a tree, it's not easy to tell what a good starting path is, so we can make that easier by first looking at some tech that you can ignore for a while or even the whole season, and then think about starting troops. Some might be stronger than others, and then use all that to think of an unlock order, because you could have the same stuff as someone else after a day, but depending on what you get first, makes a big difference. We can start by looking at some tech to ignore, and this doesn't mean that it's useless to unlock, but there might be better options to get first. So starting off from the beginning, well, we have rifles, but when you already have Zooks unlocked and everyone's gonna have to get heavies, they're generally stronger troops than rifles alone, so there isn't much point to get them. Next, we do have the option of a multi-node, but normally they aren't too strong early on in the season, and even if you want to go defensive, can be better options like snipers, for example, or a proto later on, so we can skip that for now. We also have troops like tanks on its dead end, and again we have heavies and Zooks as our starting troops, so there are faster than tanks, and if you already have a faster troop, there isn't much point in getting one that's slower. Now brick isn't as easy to skip because who wouldn't want a hero right away? But as we'll see later on, do have Kavan after 5 ER, but not just him, also a building health node right after. So building health is usually one of the strongest nodes in the tree. If you really want to get that, and you already are forced to get Kavan before it, having one hero can be enough, especially since heroes cost over 40 keys. There still is a chance that Brick could be really strong and maybe the first day, but if you want to play even somewhat long term, it's probably best to skip her. Another troop on its own is going to be Cryos, and normally they work great in a defensive meta, but if you look at the boosts, we have TD and TH, not so much building health or building damage, so in that case, Cryos might not see much use anyways. There's also a troop boost node right under, and even though you're using heavies or Zookas, your troop boosts might seem great because you get a decent bonus on them. As we'll see later when talking about the starting troops, there might be other options besides heavies or Zooks, and if you use those options, it might not be worth spending over 20 keys on just one extra boost. Past 4 ER we also have another hero, and Sparky is even more at a dead end, but the same idea applies with Brick. Since you're already getting Kavan by getting BH, you don't really need another hero to add on. And also at 4 ER are Grens, and they're also a troop that works better on a defensive meta, which we already established isn't the case. It's also the third season we've ever had hidden warriors, and they work almost the same as normal warriors except you don't need to smoke them, but you only get 5 per boat instead of 8. Even besides that, we'll get into their shock mines and normal mines early on, and no way to clear them. So even though warriors are a fast troop, if you can't get to ERs quickly, they might not be much use. But it could still be a cool troop to try if you've never used it before. If you're more focused on ranks, probably not. And the last piece of tech we can ignore are going to be medkits. You can consider them as one of the weaker abilities just because they don't affect the outcome of hits too much. So that's something we can ignore also. And just like that, you can knock down a bunch of tech that, whether it's for a few days or maybe the whole season, you can ignore for a while. And this helps narrow your options for what the starting path is going to be like. We can focus a bit on starting troops now. Everyone does get Zooks right off the bat, but the first unlock is heavy, so you can put them side by side. And heavy Zooks is staple not only in main island but also warships. Another option is heavy rush, but now we'll get into the fact that you have shock mines at the start and no way to deal with them. You might be able to heavy rush a base, but the question is if it's fast enough with all those shock mines. Using both, it's okay if heavies clear the shock mines because you're using Zooks as a damage dealer. But these may not be the only troops you have to use for a while. You also have RCs as an option, and one thing they don't care about is mines. So they can fly over shock mines and normal mines. That's already one advantage. Another advantage is looking at the 4 ER deck, and you can see that there are some gaps here and there, especially ones at the right. So using RCs means you can just fly over them instead of walking around with ground troops. And one more argument for using RCs is that there's no boom cannons until 5 ER, so already half the threats of RCs are pretty much gone. That sort of goes along with the other strong troop at 4 ER, which is going to be Seekers. Now Seekers do have to deal with the shock mines and mines, but they have decent health on their own and are super fast, so there might be a way to still use them, especially at 4 ER with not a lot of buildings. And if later on in the season, Sikhs become too tough to use alone, you can always use a few boats and do split hits. But having both these troops not on the main path, I think it's more of a fight between them, which one you're going to choose. As we'll get to in the starting path, if you want to be offense focused, I think you'd choose just one of them, whether it be RCs or Sikhs, and commit to that for a while. I think either are good options, especially if you want to rank up on the first few days. And now with just knowing what options you have as troops, we can start looking at an unlock order. So we can start with an offense path and work our way from the beginning. Right away, the only option to go to 3 is heavies. Now we are going to skip shocks for a bit because even though they're not useless by any means, sometimes it's better to get stronger tech first. After heavies, you can move on to 3 ER, because if you compare the decks, 2 ER doesn't have that much space, but when you move to 3, you get some more area to the back, so it takes longer for troops to get there, and you also get an extra ER with more health on each of them. So that'll be 3 next, and this does open the door for troop damage, but the idea of this offense path is we're rushing to one of the strong troops at 4 ER, so skipping troop damage and shocks early can lead to getting those troops faster. In that case, we eliminated most other options, so it's really just a straight path to 4 ER. Can go through cannons and mines, also going through medics. We'll pass by flare and flames, and most of those should help out. They're either major defenses or useful abilities. And finally to 4 ER. Another thing we can look at is how 4 ER compares to 3. So we already had some decent space at 3 ER, but the main advantage of 4 is going from 2 landings down to 1. When that happens, just narrow down the options for troops to go through. So in this case, 4 is a pretty big advantage compared to 3 ER. Once we get to 4 ER, we do have a couple options, whether you want to go to RCs or Seekers. So in this case, we can look at RCs and go through TH, which also can help out on heavy Zook hits, which you'll still be doing. After that is getting a Proto. In this case, I'd probably get the Hot Pot for the whole season, because with a decent amount of TH, a laser wouldn't do too much, and between a microwave and a Hot Pot, the Hot Pot also does twice its damage. But after that Proto, we can finally get RCs. Now they are expensive at 40 keys, but seeing how they can avoid mines and fly over gaps, I'd still say they're decently faster than heavy Zooks. At this point, you got your main troop, and now you can go back for other offense. So I'd probably get TD next because it really speeds up hits, and followed by shocks. Now you have most of the offense for RCs at this point. There are some defensive options too, like Protos or Sniper Towers. At this point you can decide what you want to do next. I'd probably go towards 5 ER, but since it's 90 keys, there's some time to decide. And for no IT players, I think this is also a great option. The RCs, you don't lose too many troops, whether you use them alone or bring in some heavies as a meat shield. But that's one offense path covered, and now we can switch to another one. So if RCs were one offense path, then the other could be going to Sikhs. In that case, the next unlock after 4 ER would be this multi-node, and if there's just a handful of multi-nodes this season which you might want to swap later on, this could be one of them. Because on one hand you have 7 shock mines, which could work great against other Seeker players or even heavy Zooks. Or if more RC players come about, then 2 cannons could be great against them. But if you're looking very long term, I do think 2 cannons are going to win at the end. And after that, you can finally get Seekers, which could be strong right away, but there are some key offense that you should get right after. One of them is shocks, because it's good to find a way to stop your Sikhs from dying. And after, you can decide between TD or TH. I'd probably get troop health first, because dead Sikhs don't do any damage, and then TD right after. At this point, kind of like with RCs, you have all the offensive tech for running Sikhs. So I do think the next option is just getting that Proto, again a Hot Pot, and then making your way to 5 ER. Now the reason why I wouldn't get Sikhs and RCs at 4 ER, because the more keys you spend off the main path, which is normally ER to ER, the less options you have moving forward, especially if it's tech that you don't really need. And we'll see that especially with the defensive path. So the way a defense path can work, usually changes from season to season, and in this case, might be more of a long-term play, because you'll only be using heavies and zooks, and skipping RCs and Seeks could mean you can't rank up as much at the start, but the idea is getting some defenses to back up your strength, and eventually using other troops. So in this case, there are lasers not too long after 5 ER. Going the defense path means you can probably get them sooner than most others. And once you do get them, they could be stronger than even RCs or Seeks. But looking at what to unlock right after 4 ER, I'd say the best defense is that proto in the top right, so maybe getting that Doom Cannon, and then moving on to the other proto, going through TH and Hotpot. At this point you can decide between snipers and that other multi-node, but like we said before, 2 cannons can work great against RCs and shock points against Seeks, so I'd probably get that first. Then moving on to snipers, which they may not do much damage on their own, but you get 4 extra buildings. Even with all these defenses, there's a chance that RCs or Seeks can still run through your base, but again, this is more of a long-term strategy, so regardless, I'd save to 5 ER at this point. Even though you are skipping building damage and shock launchers, if you want to get them, you have to go through RCs anyways, which is one, expensive, but also messes up the purpose of rushing to defense. Another advantage is looking at the decks. So we've already seen 4 ER how it's just one landing, but 5 just makes it more area. Whether you use ground troops or RCs, you have to travel more to clear the base. And that would be the defense path. If there's one path I'd choose between the 3, I'd say it's the first one, going to RCs. And even if you're no IT, I think that's the best one also, because they're a fast troop and a good hit wouldn't lose too many, like you would with Seeks or just heavies and zooks. And generally, I don't usually plan much after 5 ER. You can just see how things go and adapt from there. As far as how to do these hits, we will be streaming the season start with some of these paths, so that's an option. Other boom tubers also have videos and streams planned, so that might be worth checking out. Also, if you are planning to buy IT or get any shop offers, you can use a code in the shop to help out some content creators, and if you'd like, you can use code Stoneheart, which is appreciated. And what path are you planning to take, whether it's one of these 3 or making your own? I'd be curious to know in the comments. But that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.